Luke Morgan had nothing left. His last $70 were gone, spent on a grimy storage unit filled with moldy junk and fading memories. He sank onto the cold concrete floor, a broken veteran ready to surrender. But his dog, Kaiser, refused to give up. The German shepherd ignored Luke's tired command and padded toward the back wall, whining as he clawed at a single spot on the stained plywood. This wasn't the random digging of a restless dog. It was focused, sharp, and deliberate. Irritated, Luke moved to pull him away, but then froze. His breath caught. The water stains on the wall weren't stains at all. They were straight, perfect lines. That wasn't a wall. It was a door. The cold in Pittsburgh wasn't just weather. It was a living weight pressing down from the iron-gray sky, radiating from the frozen streets and crawling up from the banks of the Monongahela River with the smell of ice and rusted steel. Luke felt it in the scar tissue of his left knee, a dull throb that matched his slow breathing. He sat huddled beneath a concrete pylon, shielded from the worst of the wind, but not from the damp that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. He was tall and lean, though the layers of worn clothing hid his frame. A cracked brown leather jacket stretched over a faded flannel shirt, both stiff from years of exposure. His face, half buried beneath a patchy beard and long, unruly hair streaked with gray, looked far older than his 41 years. Hardship had carved its story into his skin, yet his eyes still carried a quiet, almost misplaced kindness. Pressed against his side, sharing and giving warmth, was Kaiser, a 7-year-old German shepherd with a thick gray-white coat that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Built strong through the shoulders and chest, Kaiser's power was tempered by calm intelligence. His amber eyes followed the slow traffic on the overpass above, ears twitching to the whine of tires on ice, yet his body stayed relaxed, a steady anchor tethering Luke to the present. Luke's gaze rested on the river, though his mind had drifted far from it. The sharp hiss of brakes from a city bus overhead tore through the air, a sound that dragged him into the past. Failing hydraulics, the hiss of death. Suddenly, he was back in the blistering desert heat of a forward base, the air thick with dust and diesel fumes. He saw Dean, laughing loud, a picture of his wife and newborn taped to the dashboard. They were checking the winch. Then came the snap, the horrific sound of the cable giving way, the massive metal load dropping in an instant. Luke hadn't been close enough to stop it, only close enough to watch Dean die beneath it. But it wasn't the death that haunted him most. It was what followed. A sterile room, the stench of cleaning chemicals. Captain Alex Hunter's face, stone-carved, eyes dead. Luke's report had said it plainly. Faulty hydraulics, ignored complaints, bad parts. Hunter listened without expression, then calmly produced his own report. Operator error. "Sir," Luke had protested, his voice cracking. "The ground was unstable." "The ground was fine." "Morgan," Hunter replied coldly, "your report is mistaken. The official finding is operator error. Dean failed to follow safety protocols." "But sir, the hydraulics—" "The supplier contract is vital to operations." Hunter cut him off, voice icy. "We will not jeopardize it over one unfortunate accident." "You are dismissed, Sergeant." Luke had stood frozen, the world draining of color. Dean was buried, and so was the truth. It was a cover-up, neat and polished, built to protect money, not men. The honor he'd sworn to uphold had been signed away with a false report. His discharge 6 months later hadn't felt like freedom. It felt like falling, and he'd been falling ever since. A soft whine pulled him back. Kaiser nudged his gloved hand, eyes full of patient loyalty. "I'm here, boy," Luke murmured, voice rough. "I'm okay." He wasn't. Their shelter beneath the bridge was no longer safe. Earlier, a city truck had arrived, and a man in a heavy coat had approached. "Fellas, I'm sorry," the man said kindly but firm. "New directive. Gotta clear the area. Liability. You can't stay." Luke had simply nodded, shame familiar as the cold. Orders were something he understood. He packed what little they owned, a sleeping bag, a small cookpot, a tarp, into the wobbling shopping cart that carried his life. As daylight faded and the air grew sharper, they stood exposed once again. "Well, Kaiser," Luke muttered, stretching his aching knee. Guess we're moving. Kaiser rose immediately, shaking frost from his coat, ready as always. Luke pushed the cart onto the sidewalk. Shelters were full, and most wouldn't take dogs. But Luke would never leave him. They were one. Across the river, silhouetted against the dying light, loomed the Meridian Steelworks, its rusted towers like bones of a forgotten giant. Abandoned since the 80s, the massive mill was a relic of a dead industry, acres of corroded metal and shattered glass, long rumored to be haunted. But it had a roof. That was enough. It took nearly an hour to cross the bridge and follow the broken service roads to the perimeter. The chain-link fence stood high, but time had carved a weakness. Near a collapsed loading dock, a rust-eaten gap gaped wide enough for 2 travelers. Luke pushed the cart as far as it would go, then unstrapped his pack and sleeping bag. The cart would have to stay behind. Together, he and Kaiser slipped through into the dead silence of the factory's heart. The foundry floor was a graveyard. Hulking machines bathed in slanted moonlight through shattered skylights. The air was colder inside, the steel radiating a deep, bone-biting chill. "This way," Luke whispered. Kaiser followed like a shadow, alert but quiet. Luke remembered exploring this place months ago, searching for shelter. He avoided the main hall and headed toward a small brick outbuilding near the administrative wing. Its faded sign read Security Office. The thick wooden door hung crooked but intact, the lock long broken. He pushed it open, hinges groaning in protest. Inside was pitch black. Luke clicked his keychain flashlight. The weak beam cut through layers of dust. A single cramped room appeared. Concrete floor, a rusted steel desk, a rotting chair. The window, though grimy, was unbroken. The roof still held. It wasn't much, but it was dry. He dropped his pack with a sigh that seemed to drain weeks of tension. The air smelled of plaster and decay, but it was still. Kaiser sniffed each corner, claws tapping on the floor, before circling twice and lying down beside the wall, his head on his paws. His eyes closed. For him, this was home. Luke sat down, his back to the wall, one hand resting on the dog's warm flank. In this frozen tomb of the Meridian Steelworks, man and dog shared a fragile peace, a harbor carved from ruin. The security office was refuge, not home, but for tonight, it was enough. Gray light crept through the grime-caked window, exposing the stark truth of their situation. The shelter was dry, but the air inside was as bitterly cold as outside. Luke woke stiff and aching, every bone protesting. Kaiser was already alert, sitting upright, his breath clouding in the frigid air. The dog's amber eyes were fixed on him, steady, expectant. Luke knew that look. Hunger. His own stomach twisted in response. He reached for his pack and checked their supplies. Half a bag of kibble for Kaiser. The crust of a stale loaf for himself. That was it. He had exactly $73 and a few coins sealed in a small plastic bag in his pocket. The last of his disability payment. Not enough for a room, barely enough to survive a few more days. Yet too much to simply waste waiting for the inevitable. He remembered the damp flyer he'd found at a bus stop days earlier. One he'd almost thrown away. He dug it out of his jacket pocket. The wrinkled paper read, Pine Ridge Storage, delinquent unit auction, cash only. It was a reckless idea. He knew those auctions were mostly prowled by pros who made a living off other people's abandoned lives. But sometimes, just sometimes, someone struck gold. Tools, furniture, something that could buy them one more week of food and warmth. "What do you think, boy?" Luke murmured, holding up the flyer. Kaiser sniffed it and sneezed. "It's a chance," Luke said softly. "It's the only one we've got." He divided the last of the kibble for Kaiser and forced down the stale bread himself. Then he secured the small office and stepped with Kaiser back into the frozen morning. The Pine Ridge Storage Facility sat on the industrial edge of the south side, rows of identical gray, buildings with bright blue roll-up doors. A small crowd had gathered near the office, about 20 people, most of them professionals in thick coats, chatting beside pickup trucks and empty cargo vans. Luke, in his cracked leather jacket with Kaiser at his heel, looked like an outsider in a world that didn't want him. He pulled his collar tighter and stood quietly at the back. A man in an orange vest stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "All right, folks, welcome to Pine Ridge," he called out briskly. "You know the rules. Look, don't touch. Cash only. You win it, you've got 48 hours to clear it." His voice was fast, clipped and built for the cold. "Let's get started." The first lock was cut with a snap, and the metal door rattled upward. For the next hour, Luke's hope slowly drained. The pros were efficient. They flashed lights into units, did silent mental math, then the bidding began before he could blink. A unit filled with antique furniture went for $800. Another packed with tools hit $1,200. Luke barely watched anymore, his gloved hand resting on Kaiser's head, drawing what little warmth the dog offered. Finally, the auctioneer, Mason Lee, stopped at the very last door. "All right, folks, last one for the day. Unit 412, tenant delinquent 9 months. Looks like a backload. We're cutting the lock now." The workers' bolt cutters snapped, the sound sharp in the cold. The door jammed halfway, then jerked upward with a screech of rusted metal. A few buyers peered inside, shined their flashlights for 10 seconds, then scoffed and turned away. "Okay, folks, what do we have here?" Mason Lee tried to keep up his rhythm, but no one was interested. Luke stepped forward. Inside, Unit 412 was a disaster, 10 feet deep, packed with sagging boxes, their sides dark and slimy with mildew. A broken lamp lay in a pile of black trash bags, some torn open to reveal mold-stained clothes. The smell was revolting, damp rot and time. "Let's start at $50, Mason Lee called. Silence. $50 for the lot. Anyone? Nothing. 20? Come on, folks, help me clear this one." Still nothing. His eyes scanned the crowd until they stopped on Luke. "You with the dog." $20, it's yours," Luke's heart thudded. It was garbage, but it was something. He thought of the $70 in his pocket. "I'll give you 50, he said. His voice came out steadier than he felt. 60, another bidder called out, just for sport. 70, Luke replied, the word slipping out before he could stop it. The man laughed and turned away. $70 it is, Mason Lee shouted quickly. "Going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman with the dog." Luke's hands trembled as he pulled out the bills. He was now completely broke. Mason Lee took the cash and handed him a carbon copy receipt. "She's all yours." 48 hours to clear it, the auctioneer said, then nodded at Kaiser. "Good-looking dog. Good luck." Moments later, the lot was silent again. Just Luke, Kaiser, and the dark, yawning mouth of Unit 412. "Well, boy," Luke whispered, throat dry. "Let's see what we bought." The stench inside hit like a wave. He pulled out his flashlight and swept the beam across the unit. The boxes collapsed at his touch, leaking soggy clumps of newspapers and decayed fabric. He searched for nearly an hour, uncovering nothing but ruined junk, cracked dishes, moldy blankets, yellowed paperbacks that turned to pulp in his hands. His $70 had bought nothing but trash. The weight of failure pressed on him like the cold. He'd failed Kaiser. He'd failed himself. Just as Alex Hunter once said, his judgment meant nothing. He sank down onto the floor, his breath fogging the air. The shadows crept close. Then, a sound. Scratching. Persistent. Deliberate. Kaiser. The dog was at the back of the unit, paws raking at a plywood wall, nose pressed to the seams. "Kaiser, stop!" Luke ordered wearily. "It's just rats." But the dog didn't stop. He glanced back, gave a short huff, then scratched again, harder. Luke exhaled sharply and forced himself to stand, his knee aching. "All right, I see it." "What is it, boy?" He shined the flashlight on the wall. The plywood looked ordinary, cheap, stained. But as the light moved upward, Luke frowned. The water stains weren't spreading or uneven. They were straight, 2 perfect vertical lines. He touched them. They were seams. It wasn't one panel, it was fitted in place. And air was leaking through the gap. Luke pressed against the wood. It shifted. His pulse spiked. He scanned the floor and spotted a rusted tire iron under a pile of rags. He grabbed it, wedged the flat end into the seam, and pushed. The damp plywood groaned, nails shrieking as they tore loose. With a dull crack, the panel gave way and fell forward into the dust. Kaiser immediately pushed his snout into the darkness, sniffing the rush of stale, cold air. Luke crouched, flashlight trembling slightly as he aimed it inside. Behind the false wall was a narrow void, 2 feet deep, running the length of the back wall. A hidden space, and it wasn't empty. Dust swirled in the beam of light. 3 objects rested neatly on the concrete floor, arranged, not discarded. Luke's heartbeat thundered. He reached in carefully. The first was a small, dark wooden box, smooth, light, about the size of a thick book. The second was a manila folder, thick with papers, and sealed by a circle of red wax stamped with an emblem he couldn't make out. The third, heavier, was a matte black metal box, military grade, secured with 3 combination locks. He pulled the items out, setting them gently on the floor. The junk around him vanished from his mind. This wasn't trash. It was a secret. Kaiser pressed against his arm, sensing the tension. "It's okay, boy," Luke whispered hoarsely. "You found it. You actually found it." Every instinct told him to open them, but a chill ran down his spine. The door stood wide open. His name was on the receipt. This was not the place. The triple lock screamed, "Keep out." He packed quickly. The wooden box and sealed folder went into his backpack. The metal case, too large to hide, he wrapped in his sleeping bag and carried under his arm. He left the rest untouched. The truth was already his. He pulled the unit door down to a narrow slit, just enough for them to crawl out, then kicked the plywood panel back in place. It wouldn't fool anyone for long, but it would hide the evidence. The walk back to Meridian Steelworks was a blur of nerves. Every passing car made his shoulders tense. Every siren felt aimed at him. The weight of the metal box was heavy, dangerous. Kaiser walked close, his body taut, matching Luke's every step. When they finally slipped through the rusted fence and into the stillness of the mill, relief came in shallow breaths. Luke found his way back to the small brick security office and shut the door tight, wedging a broken chair beneath the knob. It wouldn't stop anyone, but it made him feel less exposed. He sat on the floor, Kaiser pressed warmly at his back. The flashlight beam cut across the room. The metal box gleamed. Luke unwrapped it and set it down. Then he picked up the wooden box, thumb tracing the smooth grain. Finally, his eyes fell on the manila folder. The wax seal had aged to a dark, brittle red. He hesitated only a moment before pressing his thumb against it. The seal snapped with a dry crack that echoed faintly. Inside were folded sheets of yellowed paper, the top one written in shaky blue ink, the handwriting of someone near the edge. He began to read. "My name is Theodore Lawson. If you are reading this, I am dead." Luke's pulse quickened. "I have lived in fear for 29 years. I am a coward, and I pray God forgives me. But I cannot let the truth die with me. What I have hidden here is the truth about my brother, Jonathan Lawson. He was a good man, the best of us. He was murdered." Luke froze, heart hammering. Murdered. He kept reading, his eyes scanning faster. It was 1996. John was an activist. He discovered a cover-up, something massive, run by men with real power. He planned to go public, but they silenced him. They called it an accident, a gas leak, an explosion. The investigation was over in a week, but it was no accident. It was execution. I knew it, and they knew I knew. I took his proof and hid it. The metal box contains it all. The ledgers, the photos, the reports. The wooden box holds what's left of his life, pictures of his daughter, Audrey. I am sorry, John, I was too afraid to speak. I paid for this storage unit with the last of my money. When I die, it will be found. Maybe by a stranger. Maybe by someone sent by God. If you have any courage, any decency, please do what I could not. Don't let John's light die. Bring this truth to the world. Signed, Theodore Theo Lawson. Luke read the letter twice, then again. The words blurred. He wasn't in the cold anymore. He was back in that sterile military room, hearing Hunter's flat voice. Operator error. The contract is vital. It had always been a cover-up. His gaze fell on the black metal box. It was no longer just an object. It was truth, buried and waiting. He thought of Dean, dead and forgotten. Of Jonathan Lawson, murdered for exposing corruption. And of Theodore, The man who finally whispered the truth from beyond his grave. A man so broken by fear that he had sealed his brother's truth away in darkness. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a mistake. It was a test. Luke pressed his palms against his eyes, the full weight of the discovery pressing down on him. He hadn't spent his last $70 on trash. He'd bought a ghost. A ghost demanding that he do the one thing he'd failed to do for Dean: fight back. The flashlight's thin beam carved the small security office into a box of blinding light and deep, frozen shadow. The air was so cold it felt alive, muffling every sound, slowing every thought. Luke sat hunched on the concrete, Theo Lawson's shaky confession trembling in his hands. Kaiser felt the change immediately, the despair replaced by a sharp, dangerous purpose. The dog pressed himself against Luke's back, warm and solid, an anchor against the storm rising inside his human. Luke read the letter again, then again. But now he wasn't reading as a stranger. He was reading as a witness. The first page had been a confession. The next pages told the full story, one written in panic and guilt. Theo Lawson described two brothers, himself, the cautious coward, and John, the fearless idealist. Where Theo saw danger, John saw hope. John Lawson had been an environmental activist, a local hero who believed Pittsburgh's scars could heal. In 1995, John had bought the abandoned Meridian Steelworks, the very building Luke now sat inside. He'd bought it because it was poisoned, determined to cleanse the land and rebuild it for the people. But powerful men had wanted it for another reason. Theo's letter named one: Calvin Bishop. Even Luke, far removed from city life, knew that name. It was carved into skyscrapers, museum plaques, and the city's skyline itself. Bishop wasn't just a developer, he was Pittsburgh's power. According to Theo, Bishop had wanted the Meridian land, not to clean it, but to bury the contamination and build over it. His plan: a massive shipping hub using the river for access. But he needed the city to rezone the site, from toxic industrial to commercial. John Lawson had found the proof: falsified environmental reports, bribes to city officials, and evidence that Bishop was preparing to build on deadly ground. John had threatened to go public. Then came the fire. The 1996 explosion that destroyed John's office was called a gas leak. The investigation lasted a week. Accident, the papers said. Luke's grip tightened around the page. Bishop's men came to me after the funeral, Theo had written. They knew John kept records. They knew he trusted me. They didn't threaten me. They didn't have to. They spoke politely about the city's future. They said how tragic it would be if John's daughter, Audrey, lost her uncle too. Luke felt his stomach twist. Theo had broken. He sold the land to Bishop, surrendering everything, but kept one secret. I gave them copies of the documents, but not the original deed. The letter continued. The notarized title from when John first bought the mill is in the metal box, along with the ledgers and the falsified reports. Luke stared at the letter as the puzzle locked together. Bishop had forced the sale, but without the original title, his ownership was tainted. That was why, after 30 years, the Meridian Steelworks still stood, decaying, untouched, unresolved. It was a monument to a crime. He folded the papers and looked at the metal box. 3 locks, 3 decades of silence. And suddenly Luke was back in another place: the desert heat, the reek of diesel, the sharp crack of a snapped cable. Dean's laugh turning to silence. Then Captain Alex Hunter's voice, cold, final. The contract is vital. Dean's death. John's death. Different wars, same corruption. The same men in nicer suits. Bishop was Hunter, just richer. Dean was John, just another man erased for doing the right thing. A raw, righteous anger burned through Luke's chest. Not the wild flash of PTSD, but something clean and deliberate. He had failed once before. Letting Hunter bury Dean had destroyed him, his career, his faith, his identity. But this time, fate had given him a second chance through another coward's confession. This wasn't just John Lawson's battle anymore. It was his. This was the same war, truth versus power. He looked at the small wooden box. The last line of Theo's letter echoed in his mind. The wooden box holds what's left of his life. Pictures of his daughter, Audrey. Luke lifted the lid. Inside, on a faded piece of velvet, were fragments of another world, a child's drawing labeled Daddy and Me, a silver locket, and a small stack of photos. He spread them carefully across his knee. A smiling man, John Lawson, with the same unruly hair and kind eyes described in the letter. And in his arms, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, laughing at something beyond the frame. Audrey. She would be a grown woman now, somewhere in her 30s. A woman who'd spent her life believing her father's death was an accident. A woman who never knew her family's legacy had been buried in a storage unit. Luke stared at her face, the innocent eyes of a child who'd lost everything. And in that moment, the aimless veteran under a bridge vanished. The sergeant returned. He had his mission. He packed the photographs carefully back into the box and placed it beside the sealed folder in his backpack. His gaze fell again on the black metal case. That was the objective, the evidence. Kaiser watched him silently, head tilted. The dog whined once, softly. "It's okay, boy," Luke said, his voice low, steady. "We're done hiding. We have a new mission." He would open the box. But first, he had to find Audrey Lawson. The metal case felt heavier than steel. It carried truth and danger. Luke couldn't risk carrying it with him. That night he barely slept. The flashlight dimmed to a flicker as he stared at the locked box. When dawn came, he knew what he had to do. A soldier without a base, he needed to secure his intelligence. So, wrapped in his sleeping bag, he carried the case deep into the main building of the Meridian Steelworks. The echo of his boots followed him into a collapsed maintenance tunnel. There, under a rusted iron floor plate, he pried open a hidden crawl space using the same tire iron from the storage unit. Beneath it was dry, unseen. He lowered the metal box in, replaced the plate, scattered dust and debris. It vanished into history again, just as Theo had hidden it decades before. But not forever. The letter and wooden box, though, stayed in his pack. He'd risk his life for those. He needed information, and that meant access. There was only one place in Pittsburgh where a man like him could use a computer without questions: the Carnegie Public Library in Oakland. The journey there was tense. On the bus, Kaiser sat close, his head resting loyally on Luke's knee. People stared but said nothing. The library loomed like a sandstone fortress, warm light spilling through its tall windows. But at the entrance, a bronze sign made him stop cold. No animals permitted. Service animals only. Kaiser wasn't registered. Luke's throat tightened. He hadn't been apart from the dog in 2 years. Kaiser was his lifeline, his proof of humanity. He led him to a stone column beside the doors, sheltered from the wind. "I have to go in, boy," he whispered, kneeling. "You have to wait. I'll be back. I promise." Kaiser whimpered and pressed his head against Luke's chest. The man looped the leash around the column, his hands trembling. "Guard! Wait!" He backed away slowly. Kaiser sat still, eyes locked on him until the doors closed between them. Inside, the shift was jarring, the air warm, silent, smelling faintly of old paper and polish. Students worked beneath brass lamps, typing on laptops. Luke felt exposed, his rough jacket and unshaven face glaring in the polished calm. He kept his eyes down and moved toward the row of public computers. The chair felt soft, almost unreal beneath him. He flexed his cold hands and began searching. First, Jonathan Lawson, 1996, Pittsburgh. The results loaded fast. Digital clippings from the Post-Gazette. Tragic gas leak claims local activist. Investigation rules accidental. Community mourns, John Lawson. Each headline was sterile, clean, final. The perfect lie Theo had described. Next, Calvin Bishop. The screen filled instantly. A wall of praise. Bishop Corporation donates $5 million to Children's Hospital. Philanthropist of the Year. Bishop Tower to redefine skyline. Luke's jaw tightened. Same story, new uniform. Bishop had built an empire of charity over a corpse. He thought of Dean, of Hunter's voice, of everything he'd let slip away. Not this time. He typed again, Audrey Lawson, Pittsburgh, Dozens of results appeared: obituaries, voter records, unrelated names. Then, near the bottom, one caught his eye: a small community blog. Posted 3 weeks ago, activist Audrey Lawson challenges Bishop Corporation's new riverfront project. Luke clicked. There she was, mid-30s, standing at a podium, the same eyes as the child in the photo, determined, fearless. She was already fighting him, unaware she was walking the same battlefield her father had died on. He stared at the screen. She was alive. She was still fighting. John Lawson's daughter had grown up to continue her father's war without ever knowing it. He found her organization's website. There was a Contact Us page, but he didn't dare use it. An email could be traced. Too risky. He noted the office address, then went to the small library gift shop and bought a single blank greeting card and a stamped envelope with his remaining coins. Sitting at an oak table beneath the high ceiling, he began to write in a rough, slanted hand, "Miss Lawson, you do not know me. I have found something that belonged to your father, Jonathan Lawson, from 1996. It is a private matter of great importance. I believe it contains information he was trying to protect before he died. I cannot send it electronically. I cannot bring it to your office. It is not safe. If you wish to see this, you must meet me. I am taking a great risk by contacting you." He paused, knowing he needed proof. He opened his backpack and took out the small wooden box. From inside, he chose one photograph: John Lawson holding his daughter on his shoulders, both laughing. He also took a page from Theo's letter, careful not to include the part about the murder. John's belief in the Meridian project had been more than idealism. It was faith made tangible. He believed the poisoned soil of Pittsburgh could be reborn, that the city's ghosts of steel and smoke could become gardens, homes, and hope. Every brick of the abandoned mill, he once said, carried a chance to atone. That conviction had cost him everything. At the library's copier, Luke made a single faint copy of the page describing that dream. He folded the photocopy and the old photograph into the card and wrote, "I will be at Shenley Park by the main fountain near the cafe this Saturday at 2 p.m. I'll be wearing a brown leather jacket and have a gray German Shepherd with me. Please come alone." He signed it simply, "A Friend," sealed the envelope, and addressed it to Audrey Lawson, CO, her organization. Outside, cold wind sliced through the street. Luke's eyes scanned until they found Kaiser, exactly where he'd left him, statue still, trembling in the cold, eyes fixed on the door. The moment Luke appeared, Kaiser sprang up, tail stiff with relief. Luke knelt, burying his face in the dog's rough fur. Good boy, good boy. I'm here." He walked to the blue mailbox on the corner. The envelope in his gloved hand held a 30-year-old secret. He hesitated, then slid it into the slot. The soft clink of paper on metal was barely audible, but to Luke it sounded like a gunshot, the first shot of a new war. All he could do now was wait. The 3 days until Saturday stretched into torment. He and Kaiser huddled in the cold security office, existing between adrenaline and exhaustion. He rationed what little food remained, venturing out once under cover of darkness to retrieve the metal box from its hiding place. It sat again in the corner, a mute, heavy promise of either redemption or ruin. The soldier in him took over. He planned, rehearsed, visualized every angle of the meeting as if it were a field op. Unknown contact, exposed terrain, high-value intel. Sleep became impossible. He sat with his back to the wall, one hand on Kaiser's steady warmth, listening to the wind moan through the broken skeleton of the mill. Saturday dawned gray and merciless. At noon, Luke ate the last crust of bread. Kaiser got the final handful of kibble. "No matter what happens today, boy," Luke said, scratching his ears, "tonight I'll get you a real meal. I promise." Kaiser's amber eyes shone with quiet faith Luke wasn't sure he deserved. They left an hour early, taking a winding route to Shenley Park to watch for tails. The park was bleak and nearly empty. The fountain, a dry stone basin choked with dead leaves, stood silent. Luke took a position 50 yards away, half hidden among bare oaks. From there, he could see everything: the cafe, the parking lot, and the approach. At 150, his pulse began to hammer. By 1:58, a blue sedan turned into the lot. A woman stepped out. Audrey Lawson. She was taller than he'd imagined. Moving with quick, purposeful energy. Mid-30s, wool peacoat, jeans, boots. Her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her expression sharp, exactly like the photo on her organization's website. But as she came closer, Luke saw her father's eyes. Intelligent, driven, and shadowed by the same fatigue the city carried. She stood by the fountain, arms crossed, scanning the emptiness. Every line of her body spoke of suspicion. "Okay, boy," Luke murmured. "Let's go." He stepped from the trees, Kaiser gliding at his side. Audrey spotted them instantly. Her hand moved to her pocket, maybe for her phone, maybe for protection. She stiffened, ready to run or fight. Luke stopped 10 feet away, raising one open hand. "Miss Lawson." His voice was low, rough. "You're the one who sent the letter," she said flatly. "I am." "My name's Luke Morgan. You said you had something of my father's. This isn't a good time for games. What is this?" Her tone was sharp, skeptical, the voice of someone who'd been lied to too many times. Luke knew he had seconds to earn her trust. Slowly, he unzipped his pack and pulled out the small wooden box. "This belonged to him," he said. Her eyes locked on it, suspicion cracking. "And this," he added, holding out the faded photograph, "was inside." She took it carefully. The mask fell away. "My God!" Her voice broke. "I don't have this one. I thought they all burned in the fire." She traced the image with trembling fingers, the laughing child on her father's shoulders. Then her gaze snapped to Luke, raw confusion flooding in. "Where did you get this?" "It was with this." Luke handed her the photocopy of Theo Lawson's letter. She unfolded it, reading the unsteady handwriting. Her face drained of color as she reached the paragraph about the Meridian Steelworks, about her father's dream. She gripped the edge of the fountain to steady herself. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I found these," Luke said. "They were hidden in a storage unit. Your Uncle Theo Lawson wrote the letter. He hid everything. My Uncle Theo." Her voice cracked on the name. "He told us it was all gone. He told us to leave Pittsburgh. He said it wasn't safe." "He was afraid," Luke said softly. "He said your father was murdered." Audrey turned away, staring into the fountain's dead basin. "I knew it," she whispered. "My mother knew it. We both did. They called it an accident, but she never believed it." Her eyes met his again, sharp and alive. "Mr. Morgan, you've stepped into something you don't understand." "I think I do," Luke said. "It's a cover-up." "It's still a cover-up," she corrected, voice tightening. "I run a community group. For 6 months I've been fighting Calvin Bishop's new riverfront project." "Bishop Corporation," Luke said, remembering the headlines. "Yes, and they don't fight fair. I thought I was paranoid until now." She began pacing, her breath quick. "My phone clicks, my office was broken into twice, donors backed out last month. They're watching me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Oh God, they saw me meet you." The soldier in Luke reacted instantly. His eyes swept the perimeter. "We need to move." "You don't get it," Audrey said. "You're in danger now. Both of you." Kaiser gave a low warning sound. Luke's hand brushed the dog's neck. "I have the rest," Luke said.
"The proof."
"The ledgers, permits, the deed, it's all in a locked box. Hidden and safe." Audrey froze.
"Proof? Real proof?"
"Yes, the deed," she breathed. "That's why Bishop could never build there. It's not legally his." She looked around, mind racing. "We can't go to the police. Bishop is the police. They'd seize it, bury it, and we'd disappear." She took out her phone, then shoved it away. "They're probably listening already." "We need help." "Who?" Luke asked. "There's one man," she said quickly. "Mac Riley, ex-FBI. He built a corruption case against Bishop 20 years ago. They buried it, transferred his team, sealed his files. He quit, but he's been waiting ever since. He's the only one I trust. Can he open the box?" "If anyone can, it's Mac." They reached her car. Audrey turned to him. "Get in, both of you." Luke opened the back door. "Kaiser, hop!" The dog leaped inside. Luke followed, the smell of clean upholstery almost surreal after months on the street. Audrey gripped the wheel, the old photo still trembling in her hand. "He murdered my father," she whispered, voice hardening into steel. Then she started the engine. "Let's go see Mr. Riley." She drove like someone who'd spent years preparing for a crisis. Fast, precise, in control. Luke sat beside Kaiser, the dog's head resting on the window ledge, eyes forward, silent as a soldier. "Mac's office isn't safe," Audrey said, watching him through the mirror. "Not if they're monitoring me. We get the proof first." "Where is it?" "The Meridian Steelworks," Luke replied quietly. "Our shelter. My father's mill," she murmured, her tone a mixture of grief and awe. She turned toward the river, toward the skeletal remains of her father's dream. Audrey parked behind a collapsed brick wall hidden from the road. "Stay here. Keep the engine running," Luke said. "No," she answered. Firm. "I'm coming. I need to see it. If they're watching, the safest place for me is right next to you. And I'm not letting that box out of my sight." Luke met her eyes and saw her father's resolve burning there. He nodded once. "Kaiser, with me, guard." They slipped through the same hole in the fence. The foundry loomed, silent, vast, a mausoleum of steel and memory. Inside, their footsteps echoed. The air hung heavy with rust and ghosts. They reached the small brick office. Luke pushed the door open, metal screeching. "It's in here," he said, then stopped. Kaiser froze, muscles rigid. A low growl rumbling from his chest. Luke felt it too, the shift in the air. They weren't alone. Well, a smooth voice drawled. Two men stepped from the shadows beside the building, blocking the only exit. They didn't look like vagrants. They looked expensive. Wool coats, dark suits. The speaker, mid-40s, wore a corporate smile that never touched his eyes. Nick Sullivan. He introduced himself coolly. Behind him, the second man, Eric Dalton, stood silent, massive, his gaze flat and watchful. He was the muscle. "That's far enough," Sullivan said, his tone light but full of threat. His sharp eyes traveled over Luke's torn jacket and unshaven face with open disgust. "Private property." "You're trespassing." "We were just leaving," Audrey snapped, stepping forward. Sullivan's smile widened, cold and knowing. "Ah, Miss Lawson. We were wondering where you disappeared to. We saw you at the park. Made a new friend, I see." His gaze flicked back to Luke. "You're poking into business that doesn't concern you, old man. This city, this mill, they're not your concern. And Miss Lawson? She's in far over her head." Kaiser took one deliberate step forward, muscles coiled, the growl rising from deep in his chest. His lips peeled just enough to flash white teeth. Dalton shifted slightly, one hand sliding toward his coat pocket. "That's a fine dog," Sullivan said, eyes narrowing. "Would be a shame if something happened to him." He stepped closer. "Here's the message from people who matter. You're done. Forget this place. Forget her. Crawl back under whatever bridge you came from. We won't ask again." Luke didn't flinch. He didn't speak. His stare locked on Sullivan's, his body calculating. Hands, stance, distance, exits. These weren't security guards. They were enforcers, men paid to make problems disappear. The cover-up wasn't history. It was standing right in front of him. "We're leaving," Luke said, voice low, controlled, a growl that mirrored his dog's. "Yeah," Sullivan sneered. "You are." He gestured, and the men stepped aside, clearing the path. They didn't know about the box. This was a warning shot meant to scare them off. Luke grabbed Audrey's arm. "Go, now!" They backed out, Kaiser walking backward, eyes locked on the threat. Luke snatched the heavy metal case from the corner. It felt weightless in his grip. They moved fast, boots echoing through the hollow factory. Not until they'd slipped through the fence and reached the car did Luke breathe again. He threw the box into the trunk, slammed it shut, and climbed in with Kaiser. "Go." Audrey hit the gas, gravel spraying behind them. "They were there," she said, her voice shaking, not from fear but fury. "They were waiting." "They knew you'd come," Luke said grimly. "They're watching you, but they don't know what we have. Not yet. Then we take it to Mac. Now." Mac Riley's office sat in an aging warehouse between a plumbing supplier and a shuttered tire depot. The faded sign read, Riley and Associates, Risk Management. Audrey used a side key to let them in. Inside, the place smelled faintly of coffee, oil, and cold metal, half detective bureau, half bunker. A man stood waiting in the main room, early 60s, African-American, a neatly trimmed gray beard framing sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up, and a visible shoulder holster. The calm authority around him was unmistakable. Audrey, he greeted, his voice a smooth baritone. He nodded to Luke, reading him in one measured glance, then to Kaiser. Company, I see? Mac, this is Luke Morgan, Audrey said quickly. Luke, this is Mac Riley. He found it, Mac. My father's proof. Luke stepped forward, the heavy box in his arms. They're on to us. 2 of Bishop's men, Nick Sullivan and Eric Dalton. Recognition flashed across Mac's face. Bishop's personal muscle, ex-cops, both dirty, both dangerous. His eyes dropped to the box. So it's real. Set it down, he ordered. As Luke and Audrey explained everything, the storage unit, the letter, the ambush, Mac examined the case. His fingers traced the triple locks with professional focus. Military issue, he said finally. Late 80s, maybe early 90s. High-security tumblers. Whoever sealed this knew what they were doing. Can you open it? Audrey asked, her voice tight with hope and fear. Mac gave a small, wry smile. The Bureau teaches you how to break into things, and sometimes how to unbreak them. He crossed to a workbench, returning with slender tools and a stethoscope. Kaiser, after sweeping the room with a soldier's precision, lay near the door, still, watchful. For 20 tense minutes, the only sounds were the faint metallic whispers of Mac's picks and the soft click-click of the tumblers. He worked with the patience of a surgeon, listening, adjusting, waiting. 1, he murmured. Click, then the second. Snick. The third lock resisted, but Mac was relentless. 10 long minutes later, click. He straightened, satisfied. That's 3. He released the latches. The heavy lid thudded as the internal lock disengaged. It's your history, kid, he told Audrey softly. You open it. Her trembling hands lifted the lid. Inside, the contents looked untouched by time. Dry air, the scent of leather, paper, and ink escaped. Mac began removing each item carefully, like artifacts from a tomb. Item 1, he said. Leather-bound journal. Audrey flipped through pages filled with her father's neat handwriting. Her lips parted in a quiet, broken gasp. Item 2, Meridian zoning permits 1995. He spread them across the desk, all bearing city seals, fake ones. Item 3, 2 ledgers. He opened one, scanning the columns. Bribes, dates, shell companies. It's all here, Luke pointed to the bottom. There's more. Mac reached in and pulled out a small black microcassette recorder. My God, Audrey whispered. He recorded him. Mac turned it over in his hand, inspecting the label. Bishop, 1996. But before he could say more, Kaiser's head shot up. His body went rigid. Luke was instantly beside him. What is it, boy? Mac moved fast to the window, parting the blinds just enough to see outside. A second later, he let them fall. Damn it! What? Audrey demanded. You were followed, Mac said flatly. Or I was. His jaw tightened. Black sedan. Lights off. 2 inside. Sullivan and Dalton. They know we're here, Luke said quietly. They know we have the box, Mac added. He was already moving, mind in tactical mode. We split, now. Audrey's breath hitched. The air in the room seemed to shrink. They're watching the front, Mac said quickly. They expect panic. That's when they'll move. What's the plan? Luke asked. I'm the decoy. Mac shoved the ledgers and journal back into the case. The lock snapped shut. They'll chase me. I've got the prize they want. You 2 go out the service door in the alley, quietly. Where do we go? Audrey asked, voice trembling. Anywhere but home, Mac said. No phones, no cards. Go dark. And you? I'm taking the box to Chloe, the one lawyer Bishop can't buy. She'll hide it. When I'm clear, she'll find you. He grabbed his truck keys, lifting the case. Go, Luke didn't argue. He took Audrey's arm, pulling her toward the rear. Kaiser stayed tight to his side. Behind them, Mac's engine roared to life. Another engine answered, hard, fast. The chase was on? He got them, Audrey said as they slipped into a frozen alley. Not both, Luke answered. Listen, footsteps. Heavy, fast. Dalton, he whispered. He's on foot. He'll cut us off. He pulled her into a narrow gap between two buildings, thick with dumpsters. They pressed into the shadows. Kaiser stood before them, a statue of muscle and focus. The footsteps thundered past, then slowed. Dalton had realized he was coming back. Luke crouched beside Kaiser. See him? Go. Get him. He pointed down the opposite alley. The shepherd bolted from the darkness, barking in explosive, echoing bursts. There! Dalton's voice roared. His steps turned, chasing the sound. Now, Luke hissed. Go left. Fast! Don't run! They moved quickly, blending into the night. For nearly a mile they didn't stop, cutting through empty lots and ghostly streets until the adrenaline began to fade. Audrey stumbled, shaking. I can't, she gasped, teeth chattering. I have nowhere to go. Luke steadied her, voice calm. We need cover. Somewhere no one will look. Where? He turned toward the river, toward the black outline of the mill. The one place they think we ran from? She hesitated, fear flickering. Back there? They're gone. They followed Mac. The mill's the last place they'd check. After a moment, she nodded weakly, as if summoned. Kaiser appeared from the dark, tail low, breath steaming. He pressed against Luke's side, then nuzzled Audrey's hand gently. The walk back was brutal, the wind slicing like knives, but Luke's stride was steady, purposeful. When they slipped through the fence again, the ruined factory loomed like a cathedral of ghosts. To Audrey, it was nightmare. To Luke, fortress. Inside the security office, the cold bit deep. It's colder in here than outside, Audrey whispered. Sit, Luke ordered softly but firmly. Against that wall, it's insulated. He nodded to the dog. Kaiser, watch her. Kaiser obeyed instantly, lying close, pressing his warm body against her trembling legs. She gasped as the heat spread through her frozen limbs. Luke moved methodically, retrieving a rusted barrel, dragging it to the center. He disappeared and returned with splintered wood and crumpled paper. Soon a small flame flickered inside the barrel, casting rippling orange light across the walls. Audrey watched him, steady, calm, efficient. He wasn't surviving. He was operating. He pulled a blackened pot and a foil-wrapped ration bar from his pack. Eat, he said simply, breaking the bar in half and handing it to her. What about you? She asked weakly. We're fine, he said. Eat, she obeyed. The taste was bitter, but the warmth, the food, and Kaiser's body heat began to thaw her bones. Luke sat across from her, face lit by firelight, eyes sharp and focused on the doorway. He was alert but unafraid, commanding, disciplined, and in that moment Audrey saw him differently. Not a drifter, not a broken man. A soldier, a man who had nothing, yet gave her warmth, food, and safety. A man with more honor in his scarred hands than Calvin Bishop had in his entire gleaming empire. Respect settled over her. Deep, wordless, unshakable. You knew exactly what to do, Audrey said softly. Luke didn't look up from the fire. In the service, you learn to make a home out of whatever you've got. You learn to watch, and you learn to wait. Thank you, Luke, she said, the words feeling small and inadequate. For all of this, he gave a short nod. Kaiser sighed contentedly and rested his heavy head on Audrey's lap, trusting her. The three of them sat in the cold, flickering light, a small, defiant island of warmth surrounded by shadow, waiting for dawn. When morning came, the fire had burned to gray ash. The pale light of day crept through the cracked window, revealing them huddled together, filthy, exhausted, but alive. Kaiser, who had kept his post all night, let out a soft whine as the world shifted from dark to light. Audrey looked at Luke. The fear they'd shared and the long, frozen night had forged something between them, a bond built on survival and quiet respect. What now? She asked, her voice rough with fatigue. Now, Luke said, his tone gravelly but firm. We take the fight back." They didn't wait long. At exactly 7 a.m., a gray van rolled up to the loading dock outside their fence gap. The driver's door opened. Mac Riley stepped out and gave a sharp whistle. Kaiser's ears perked up instantly. "He's clear," Luke said, relief flooding him. "Let's go." They slipped out through the fence. Mac, looking exhausted but alive, met them halfway. "Sullivan and Dalton followed me halfway across the state," Mac said quietly. "Lost them near the stadiums. But they know they're hunting." His eyes sharpened. "Good, let them." He opened the van door. "Get in, both of you." Kaiser jumped into the back. Luke helped Audrey, who was stiff from the cold, and climbed in after her. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The only fortress we've got left," Mac said. "My lawyer's office." Mac didn't drive them to a skyscraper, but to a quiet brownstone in the old district. The brass plaque read C.L. Park, attorney at law. The door opened before they could knock. A woman in her late 40s stood there, perfectly composed in a gray, tailored suit. Her black hair was drawn into a severe bun, her eyes sharp and unreadable. "Mac." She nodded, then turned to the others. "Miss Lawson. Mr. Morgan." Her gaze lingered on Luke for a moment, taking in his worn jacket and haunted face, then dropped to Kaiser. "Well-behaved," she said. "He's a guard, not a pet," Luke answered quietly. "Good." She led them into a polished conference room. In the center of the mahogany table sat the heavy metal box, an artifact of secrets in a lawyer's tomb. A man stood near the window, coffee in hand, mid-30s, sharp but restless, his shirt rumpled, his eyes those of someone who'd heard every excuse. "This is Jake Miller," Chloe said. "The best investigative reporter in the city and the only one I trust." Jake gave them a quick nod. "This is one hell of a story. If it's true..." "It's true," Audrey said, her voice steadying. "That's what we're here to prove," Chloe replied, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Good morning. Mac and I have been busy while you were off the grid," she gestured to the table. "The original documents are secured. Copies are stored on encrypted servers in 3 states. The microcassette is being restored by a forensic audio expert. We'll have the file by tomorrow." Then, folding her hands, she continued. "I've already started calling the names from John Lawson's journal. Turns out your father wasn't the only accident tied to Bishop's projects in the 90s. Audrey's eyes widened. "What?" 6 other men, Chloe said quietly. "All died in supposed accidents between 1996 and 1998. Everyone connected to Bishop's developments. 3 families have already contacted me. A woman named Anna Parker is ready to join our civil suit." Audrey looked shaken. The story had just grown into something far bigger than her father. It was a web of blood and corruption. Before anyone could respond, Chloe's desk phone chimed softly. "Miss Park," her assistant's voice said through the intercom. "A Mr. Chris on line 1, counsel for the Bishop Corporation." The room fell silent. Luke glanced at Mac, who gave a grim nod. They'd been found faster than expected. Chloe pressed the speaker button. "This is Chloe. Who am I speaking with?" A voice, smooth and practiced, filled the room. "Good morning, Miss Park. I'm Chris, representing Mr. Calvin Bishop. It's come to our attention that you possess certain archival materials belonging to his company. My client is a reasonable man. He believes in resolving misunderstandings privately. He requests a brief meeting to rectify this situation." "I'm not sure there's anything to discuss, Mr. Chris," Chloe replied coolly. "Oh, I think there is," the lawyer purred. "My client is prepared to make a generous offer to Miss Lawson. 10 o'clock, our office." "No," Chloe said instantly. 10 o'clock, my office, and your client will attend in person." A pause. Then, "That is unusual, but I'll inform him." Click. The dial tone hummed. Jake Miller exhaled slowly. "He wants to buy you off." "He wants to know what we have," Max said. "And who we are," Luke added, his jaw tight. He was finally going to see him, the man behind it all. At precisely 10 a.m., the conference doors opened. 3 men entered. Calvin Bishop led them. He was tall, perhaps 80, but carried himself with the calm arrogance of a man who had never once been denied. His white hair was immaculate, his dark suit flawless, his expression the very image of virtue. Behind him came Chris, the lawyer, briefcase in hand, and a younger man, sharply dressed but uneasy. "Ben Bishop," Chloe murmured. "The heir." Luke stared at Calvin Bishop. The polished smile, the posture, the quiet authority, it was all too familiar. It was Alex Hunter in a different suit, the same mask of power. His blood turned cold. Kaiser, lying under the table, gave a single low growl, catching the current of fury rolling off his handler. "Miss Park." "Miss Lawson," Bishop said smoothly. "Mr. Riley, it's been a long time." He turned to Luke. The warmth in his expression vanished. His eyes swept Luke's worn jacket and scarred face, and in that instant, Luke saw recognition. This was the variable, the problem. "Please sit," Chloe said sharply. Chris began. "As I mentioned, Mr. Bishop values this city's history. He was a contemporary of Mr. Lawson's and regrets that tragedy. My client wishes to make a goodwill gesture, $8 million for your father's personal effects, with a full confidentiality agreement." Audrey's voice was calm but unyielding. "My father's memory isn't for sale." Bishop smiled, patient, patronizing. "My dear, this was 30 years ago. Records blur, stories twist. This is a chance to walk away whole." "No one walks away from this hole, Mr. Bishop," Chloe cut in. She slid a copy of John Lawson's journal across the table. "We have the ledgers, the permits, the bribes," Chris snorted. "Circumstantial. The ramblings of a dead man. It won't hold up." "Then perhaps you're more worried about the living," Chloe replied. "I've been retained by Anna Parker, representing 6 other families whose loved ones died on your sites." The name hit like a gunshot. Ben Bishop flinched. Chris lost his smirk. "And," Chloe continued, "there's the tape, the recording of your meeting with John Lawson 3 days before his death." The room froze. Bishop's mask cracked. The grandfatherly calm was gone, replaced by hard, cold steel. It was Ben who finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Grandfather, if this goes public, the press, the families, it won't be a lawsuit. It'll destroy us. Our stock will collapse by noon." "Be quiet," Bishop snapped. "No," Ben said, standing. "This is my future, too. We need to control the damage." He turned to Chloe. "What do you want?" Chloe's smile was razor thin. "The truth. A public admission of your role in the violations and the cover-up that killed Jonathan Lawson and 6 others. A $20 million compensation fund for the families. A $30 million endowment for a city safety foundation in their names." "Impossible," Chris barked. "It's that," Jake Miller said quietly from the corner, "or my story runs tomorrow." "Your choice." Ben looked at his grandfather. "Sir, it's the only move left. We have to control the narrative." Calvin Bishop's shoulders sagged. He wasn't beaten by justice or guilt, just by arithmetic. He looked at them one by one, Luke, Audrey, Mac, with eyes of pure, undiluted hatred. "Draft the agreement," he said at last, voice flat. "We'll sign." The silence that followed was thick, like air before a storm. When it was done, Bishop's signature landed on the page with a sharp, angry stroke. A king forced to abdicate. Then he and his entourage left without a word. Jake Miller finally spoke. "It runs tomorrow," he said quietly. Front page. The next morning, the Post-Gazette headline screamed, "The Meridian Betrayal. Bishop admits 30-year cover-up." The story was explosive. Every detail laid bare. The fake reports, the bribed officials, the 7 dead men. At its heart, the quiet discovery by a forgotten veteran. Luke read the paper on a park bench, Kaiser at his feet, the city alive around him. He saw Bishop's face staring from the page, the same hollow smile now stripped of its illusion. He thought of Dean, of Alex Hunter, of the word truth. He felt no victory, just the quiet relief of a lock finally opening. Fallout came fast. Bishop's stock collapsed. The city council convened investigations. Universities removed his name from their halls. The empire of lies fell to dust. Winter gave way to spring. The cold eased. Life crept back into the world. Luke and Kaiser stayed at the mill, not as ghosts, but as guardians. Mac and Audrey visited often, bringing food and supplies. The hunger was gone. So was the silence. One bright March afternoon, Audrey arrived with a spark in her eyes. She found Luke repairing the office door, moving with quiet precision. "The settlement's done," she said. "The families have their funds." "It's finished," Luke nodded. "That's good. And the land, my father's mill, it's legally mine now," she added, smiling. "Developers are already offering fortunes for it." "You're selling?" Luke asked. "No." She smiled wider, fierce. "I'm rebuilding. With Bishop's own money. A community center, housing for families, and a veteran outreach wing. Here, on this ground." Luke blinked. "You mean it?" "I do. But I can't do it alone." She stepped closer. "I need someone to run the site. Someone who knows this place. Someone I trust." He stared at her, stunned. "Audrey, I'm a homeless man." "I don't—" "Stop," she said firmly. "I'm not offering charity, Luke. I'm offering a job." Her voice softened. "When I was freezing and terrified, you stayed calm. You led. You protected me. You built a fire and gave me back my strength. That's the man I want running this project. Sergeant Luke Morgan, head of maintenance and security for the Meridian Community Project." Luke couldn't speak. His throat tightened, eyes burning. He saw no pity in her expression, only respect. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "I accept." 6 months later, the Meridian Steelworks was unrecognizable. The old skeleton of steel echoed with new life, machines, voices, hope. Luke stood at the window of his bright new office, once a cold ruin, now rebuilt. The patch on his uniform read Meridian Community. Kaiser patted in, nails clicking on clean tile. His coat gleamed. His eyes were calm. "Time for our walk, boy," Luke murmured, scratching his head. Together they stepped into the afternoon light. The mill had become a living monument, a future built from the bones of the past. Luke looked out over the rising structures, the hum of progress filling the air. He thought of John Lawson, of Dean, and of all the ghosts finally laid to rest. He wasn't a shadow anymore. He had a mission. He had a home, and beside him the loyal friend who had helped him find it again.